All right, everybody, I want to welcome you back to another episode of The Shadows Podcast. I'm your host, Trip Bodenheimer, and this is incredible for me. I'm here with my favorite Gladiator. Electra was my favorite female. Laser was hands down my favorite gladiator. So I'm
Oh
sitting
yeah.
here today with Jim Starr, Laser from American Gladiators. Sir, welcome to the Shadows Podcast.
Thank you, Trip. I really appreciate you inviting me and been looking forward to this. I know we had it scheduled the other day. Things didn't work out, but we're here today and well, let's get it started.
Yeah, let's get it going here. So first thing I want to do, I want to ask you just a couple of random questions
Yeah.
before we get started. Book recommendation for our listeners out there.
Say that one more time. I missed
You
that.
have a book recommendation or podcast recommendation for listeners?
Uh, I don't. I do not. No, no.
Okay. What about this one? This is a fun question. Dinner for three, three historical figures who are no longer with us. Who would you break bread with?
Ooh, well, that's a good question. Son
Okay.
of a gun. Oh my gosh. Uh, I would definitely have my dad back if I
Oh,
could.
yeah.
He passed in 2009. I was gee whiz, a big fan of Walter Payton. Uh,
Sweetness.
yeah, sweetness. He was, I emulated Walter Payton when I was a little kid, trying to be his moves. Uh, boy, I don't know. Maybe John Wayne.
Okay.
Yeah,
That's a solid three right there.
yeah, there you go.
Okay. All right. Well, I want to jump straight into your journey here. So, first of all, you were talking about the different aliases you go by. I joke with people
Yeah.
because I'm Edward on LinkedIn. I'm Trip if you know me, and then in the military I'm Bodie.
Gee.
Yeah,
Hey,
I can tell my friend level based on
your
how they
names are more.
identify.
You're as confusing as I am. Nobody knows to call me Jim Starr or my birth name, which is Jim Califat. So how Starr started. I was in I did some commercial work and acting prior to the Gladiators in 1989. So 86, 87, 88, 89, I was doing commercial work. And I did a movie with Robert Conrad. It was a football movie. And all of the guys that were on that movie started calling me Jimmy Starr, on the football field. And so that same week, I had to get Z cards done because you had the little 5x7 Z cards that you'd bring in and drop off to the agent when you're
Yep.
on your audition. And I was getting those produced, and I had called the photographer and said, "Listen, let's instead of Califat, because everyone was like, huh? How do you spell that? What's that? Where's that origin from? Nationality." And so I just put Jim Starr on my Z card, and that carried through the Gladiators. It carried through my professional career for 26 years. So more people knew me as Starr than they knew my real last name. And I have to be like you. I got to be like, do I go by Starr, Califat? Yeah, I'm a little
Yeah.
confused half the time. So anyhow, I kind of hyphen it. I go Jim Califat Starr, or Jim Starr hyphen Califat. So
Parentheses. Yeah.
yeah, whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I say if I hear Edward, I'm in trouble. That's usually my mom or somebody. But
There you
so
go.
you grew up in Great Falls, Montana. What was childhood like for you?
Oh wow! And speaking of Great Falls, I'm here today visiting mom, my sister, a bunch of buddies. So I'll be here most of the summer. But
Wow.
so Great Falls, Montana. I still consider Montana my home. It's a very special place to me, and just a special place. Period. It's God's country, Big Sky country. It is a. If anyone's watched Yellowstone,
Oh, I
it's a
love
little like
Yellowstone.
Yellowstone. It's
Yeah.
the Wild Wild West. You do not f around with people in a bar. You don't bump somebody because it's gonna be an automatic fight. It's
Yeah.
just you good people, but they're 10, 15 years behind most of the other 49 states in terms of uh, socially kind of getting along. It's a little bit like Yellowstone, not as bad, but yeah, you walk into a bar and you better not run into anybody because
Yeah.
that's an automatic getting in your face. We're gonna go to blows. So, but it's a heck of a city and a state. Just good people. good, hardworking people, and it's still like considered my home.
Did you always want to be an athlete growing up?
I did, boy. So I remember, speaking of Walter Payton, I remember third, fourth grade. Just I had this vision of always wanting to be a professional football player
Mhm.
growing up, and I remember the first time we were in sixth grade. We were playing flag football. It was actually tackle football down here at the park, and I went up for a pass, and this guy hit me with his head and knocked my tooth right through my lip, and I couldn't get my lip off my
Oh,
tooth, and I kept playing, and I was bleeding, and I was in fifth or sixth grade, and I walked home from the park, and my mom about fainted, and she said, "Jim, what is wrong with you? You are bleeding like profusely. Like, we need to get you to the hospital. Why didn't you come home?" I said, "Because I was playing football."
I
And
won.
I think it all started then, that toughness. And, on the Gladiator documentary, I talked about my dad being, just that toughness. And he was a hell of an athlete. He went to Washington State on a boxing and football scholarship. And, my dad never pushed me into sports, nor did my mom. I think you're kind of born with that element of just that umph, that
Competitiveness.
yeah, and I
Yeah.
I had it at an early age. I mean, and that's with everything in life. Work, doing yard work.
Yeah.
I'm a perfectionist. I have to have it done right. If I don't, my granddad taught me a valuable lesson growing up. He said, "Listen, um, well, let me back up. I was sweeping his garage floor, and as a young kid, you're going to cut corners, and
Oh yeah.
you
No
don't
one's
do
looking.
such you don't do
Yeah.
such a great job." He sat me down. And he said, "Look at the job you just did." He said, "It took you about an hour to sweep my garage." He said, "The unfortunate thing, you didn't do the best job that you could possibly do. Now you got to go back and redo it, which means you take twice as much of your own time." That taught me a lesson
Yeah.
at an early age that if you're going to go out and do something, do it right the first time. Put 110% effort into it, no matter what you're doing. Husband, a dad, working in the backyard, hunting, fishing, whatever it is, just just do your best, because we don't have that much time to follow up doing everything else multiple times. So yeah, so kind of I kind of went off on a tangent there, but yeah.
What did your mom do growing up?
So mom was well, she's tough. She was from, this is a great story. So she's from the upper middle class, North Hollywood. My dad was born and raised in Great Falls, Montana.
Okay.
My mom leaves North Hollywood, goes to Washington State, and guess who she meets? My dad, who's a rough and tough, and I'm telling you, a tough son of a bitch. He a fist fighting, and plus a boxer.
I was like
And
boxer scholarship. Yeah.
oh yeah, and they met and fell in love. And her parents were like, "You are not marrying a Montana guy." My dad actually, unfortunately, his sophomore year got in a bar fight and about killed a guy and got kicked off the football and the boxing team, which back then fights were prevalent, right? I mean, that just didn't happen. And so he lost his scholarship, and so he went back to Montana. Lo and behold, my mom follows him to Montana. They open up a dude ranch, and she's hauling water and cooking meals for all the hunters and fishermen, and she did that for years. And then she went back and got her degree and a master's and became a school teacher. So she was a first grade school teacher for 25 years, something like
Oh,
that.
wow.
Yeah, so pretty cool.
Oh, that's also yeah. I teach right now. I've been teaching for the last
Oh,
seven
you do?
years, and and
Yeah,
I and I had not grown up until maybe a couple of years ago when I realized what I wanted to do. And teaching is that thing that I want to do after I hang up my military
yeah,
uniform. So much respect to her for doing
for
that.
sure.
Your father, you talked a lot about him on the Netflix documentary, which folks, if you've not watched it, I have been telling any and everybody that I bumped into, especially at work, I'm like, you have got to go watch this next. I think it's like a 5-part series
Yeah, five
that was
five
put together.
episode series. Yeah,
It's incredible because it's not just, back in the day you'd watch the episode, turn it off, but you're getting to hear these stories much like you are here. And in there, you were very transparent and vulnerable about your relationship with your dad, which I lost my father at 11 years old. In
oh
fact,
sorry.
I would watch Gladiators with my dad, which
Yeah,
is kind of cool to be talking to you
right.
today. You were very open about your relationship with your father, and you mentioned he was hard on you. But what was that like disconnect as a kid to where you felt like you were constantly striving for his attention growing up? Where do
Yeah,
you think that stemmed from?
yeah. Thanks for yeah. Makes me emotional. I don't know why, but so um, at an early age, I just, my dad came from that era where men were men and just
Don't
tough,
cry.
right? And
Yeah,
his dad never showed him love, never put his arm around him, never told him he loved him. It was you went to work at an early age, and that was instilled into my dad from his dad. He didn't know how to show his emotions. And my dad he was a contractor and he ran horses. He was into race horses. And I don't know. My dad never physically ever touched one of us, or my siblings or myself. He did kick me in the ass one time because I accidentally ran over our dog and I was
that's
going too
warranted. That's
fast.
warranted.
That's warranted, right? And he told me to slow down. I did, and I ran over our dog, and the dog was fine. But he had this voice that was just menacing, like deep, and and he was a big guy, 6'2", 250, and I was just scared of him, right? I mean, I just literally fearful of my dad. And growing up, it was that same way. And I just wanted his attention. Like I wanted him to notice me. So I would do everything. I would clean his trucks at a young age. I'm talking 10 years old. I'd go out and wash his trucks and put all his tools away and just I just wanted him to pay attention to me. And he took me hunting all the time. But I was so fearful of him yelling, even when we were hunting, because I thought maybe I was so fearful of us getting stuck with the 4-wheel drive because I didn't want him to fly off the handle. Here I'm a little boy just shaking, thinking, please, please, please don't get stuck. Please don't get stuck
Yeah.
because I didn't want him upset. So that just carried over from high school and college. And it hit me in college because all of my roommates, their dads would come up after the game, hug their son, say, God, good job, son. Way to go. My dad never did. He
Mm-hmm.
would come on the field, but he never hugged me, never told me I had an awesome game. And that just carried through, and that anger that just spewed inside me. Just, God, I don't know, just really emotional shit.
Yeah.
And we, I was 40 some years old before I finally, on the Gladiator documentary, they didn't really, I talked about it, but the way this occurred is my my wife Tanya talked to me and she said, "Listen, you need to." I found this men's weekend retreat. It wasn't religious; it was just men being men,
Right.
and it was about how men uh, most men that are walking around in today's society are hurting based on their fathers. They didn't get the love, they didn't get the attention, whatever that is. So I went to this men's weekend retreat, and the last night we were there, the head guy said, "Listen, if you have a father that's still alive, lucky you, because guess what? You get to call your dad, meet
Yep.
that person in 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 their environment, and tell tell your dad you're proud of him, because they may not know. They're always wondering. We as fathers are always wondering, did I do a good job raising my kids?
Yeah.
That right? That enters in your mind. So after that men's weekend retreat, I went home to my wife. She said, you need to fly your dad out to California, take him to the Santa Anita racetrack, just have a day with him. He loves doing that. And then take him to dinner and just tell him you're proud of him. So I had it planned, flew my dad out. The whole day, I'm trying to not think about, I mean, I never talked to my dad, like a couple words here and there. So after the races, we get in the car and I said, "Hey, let's go to dinner and let's just have a drink or whatever." And he said, "No, let's go home. I'm tired." Well, before I would say, "Okay, Dad. Okay." I'm 43 years old,
Yeah.
and I'm afraid of my dad, and I'm 240 pounds.
Former gladiator.
And you don't ever challenge your dad. I don't care how
Yeah.
tough you are. So he said, "Now let's just go home." I said, "No." And I had it in my mind. I said, "No, Dad, come on, let's just go eat." He goes, okay, let's just go eat." So we go into it was this restaurant. We sat at the bar. He did not drink, so we still sat at the bar. And it took everything I had just to put my arm around my dad. And I put my arm around him, and he looked at me like, "What are you doing?" And I said, "Hey, Dad, I just want to tell you, man, I am so darn proud of you for raising the way you raised me and my siblings." And I said this on the documentary without a moment's hesitation. He said, "Son, I've always been proud of you, and I've always loved you." And let me tell you, it, it, it was months in the making of me knowing not to show my emotion, not to cry, not to bring everything up, because that's what the men's weekend retreat was about. It wasn't to shame your dad. It was just
Yeah.
to let him know, because they will know. And boy, I got to tell you that the weight that lifted off my shoulders, ooh, just man,
Imagine.
I can't even express the mountains of weight that was just lifted. I just felt like light as a feather. And we had the best relationship up until he died. I think we had a good 7 years, but he became a better father to the rest of his kids. He became a
Wow.
great grandpa. Him and my wife are so close, and it's a blessing. And I've told this story
Yeah.
to a lot of guys, and a lot of the guys were in my situation that ended up calling their dads and telling them that same story, and it changed their relationship from that point on. It's
Wow.
remarkable. It really is.
Wow. How was it getting to see him as a grandfather
It was
after that talk?
so freaking cool, man. It
Oh
just
gosh.
makes you emotional because he didn't do it with us.
Yeah.
Myself, my brother, my two siblings. He was a little bit more affectionate to my sisters, to his daughters, but to see him engage and be actively being a granddad and kind of as a dad at the same time, it just was just the best thing ever. Yeah, it was very cool.
And like you mentioned, that was a different time. Our parents and grandparents were coming up, and it was a badge of honor if
Yeah,
grandfather passed away, and it's like, wow, he was a real man. He never shed a
yeah,
tear. And it's a stigma that still today in 2023 is tough to break, to where uh the 9th of July was exactly 30 years that my father passed away, and I'm sitting on the
wow,
couch with my family, and all of a sudden it just hits me, and I start
did it?
just tearing up. But I'm like, my daughter's here, my wife's here, like, can't let it out. And then
Yeah,
finally, my daughter came over and gave me a hug, and I just
and I
lost it.
and I lost it. Yeah,
Hmm.
and you know
And
what? You know what, Trip? There's nothing to me. I'm an emotional guy. I mean,
yeah,
I'm heated. I'm tough. I can scrap with the best of you, but boy, I got a heart. I mean, I'm a very emotional guy, and there is in anything wrong with showing your emotion in front of your kids in terms of
yeah,
crying, holding them. I mean, you become vulnerable, and your
yeah,
kids know that they can come to you. It's pretty darn special that a man can do that as a dad to their own kids. It
yeah,
really is.
yeah. What did that teach you about forgiveness, or like what message did you have for our listeners about forgiveness out there?
It's you have to be mentally. I think you just have to be prepared to have forgiveness, because I'm one. I'll hold a grudge if you do something. to me or my family. Uh, and I'm still that way today. I have a hard time letting go.
It's heavy.
It's heavy, but you
Yeah.
have to you have to do a bunch of soul searching, and it's got to come from your heart. When you forgive, you truly have to forgive. There's not something I'm holding over you, uh,
Yeah.
and there's conditions to it. So I'm still dealing with that. I'm still trying to be a better person in terms of forgiveness, but yeah, I mean, I think that was my first time in my entire life that I forgave another
Mm,
human being, and that was my dad,
yeah.
because I held a lot of grudges, a lot of things that I regretted, and I held that for so long. And once I made that decision to forgive, like I said, it was mountains on top of mountains that was lifted off my shoulders. So
Yeah. Such a good feeling too to be able to say
yeah,
that and to experience that. And you went on with Montana State, correct? Played
yeah, I
football?
did. Yeah, I
Yeah.
had quite a few different scholarship offers, but wanted to stay. And my recruiting trip to Montana State was a lot of fun. And they had a great coach by the Sonny Lubick. And so I decided to stay in the state of Montana and play for MSU.
Yeah, and you clearly excelled. I think you had a position change. You went from what, tailback
I
to
did.
to to linebacker, was that correct?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, just I was 200 pounds when I graduated high school. I was the leading rusher in the state of Montana. And
So
they
you had that
recruited
Walter
me as
Payton in you.
they recruited me as a fullback, full ride, and I shared that position as a true freshman with a senior. As a fullback, we shared the starting role, and then my sophomore year, I was a starting fullback, and then we had a new coach come in by the name of Doug Graber, and we were doing winter conditioning, and he pulled me aside and said, "Jim, I know your goal is to play professional football. You really don't have the wheels. You're not running a 4-4." He said, you got that mentality. I can just see it. Why don't we, you want to try linebacker, inside linebacker? I said, yeah, let's give it a shot. So winter's done, winter condition, we start spring ball, and I just flourished. I mean,
Yeah.
wow, where have I been? And it just, that was it. I mean, that was with all that, just that aggression and anger, and I want to just kick your ass type attitude. Man, I just took off, and I broke all kinds of records. It's still, Big Sky records and most
Tackles in a
tackles.
game, right?
Yeah, I think 32 tackles in one game,
Hmm.
and I had 202 tackles my first year as a linebacker. That still holds true today. And then my senior year, I missed 3.5 games due to an ankle injury, and I ended up at 178. I would have crushed the 202 record easily. I would have been 240, probably 240 tackles. So, yeah, just I wish I would have played that position when I was younger, growing up instead of tailback. But it is what it is.
Geez, 32, that's a high draft pick in today's
Yeah, yeah.
NFL. Teams salivate over that. And do you think, you mentioned some of that aggression? You think some of that aggression was from the relationship you had with your dad at the
Oh,
time?
you better believe it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Whether I knew it or not, I
Yeah.
mean, I'm holding
Subconsciously.
subconscious. Absolutely. I wasn't out there going, I hate my dad.
Right.
I'm aggressive because of it never came to mind. But I can tell you, when I wasn't playing football or thoughts would enter my mind, you have that little voice, that inner voice that's speaking to you all the time. I was pissed. I'm mad, and I was angry. And so I think that anger just carried over to athletics.
Hmm.
Um, and also my personal life. I've been in a lot of fist fights, and thank God I've never really injured anybody or gotten thrown in jail a couple of times, but it never embarked on my career where something magnificently happened on the bad side of it. So I'm very fortunate of that. But yeah, um, yeah, that anger, I'm still trying to tame that beast today. I
Yeah.
got that. I don't, when I'm mad, shit, I'm mad. Like it gets out of
Just leave you
control.
alone for 20 minutes.
Yeah. Yeah. So I don't know, but
Yeah, I
anyhow,
heard. I'm not going to spoil it for people. Check out the Netflix documentary where you
yeah.
talk about the bloody knuckles.
Yeah.
Uh, but so you had a cup of coffee, what, in the USFL with, I believe it was the
San Antonio Gunslingers. Yeah.
San Antonio Gunslingers.
I was drafted by, I thought my agent, who was Ken Stanager out of Montana, he represented a lot of big time athletes. We really thought I was going to get drafted in the NFL, but unfortunately, we had a terrible senior year. We went 1-10. I missed those 3.5 games, so I wasn't getting a lot of scouts coming to look at us. And unfortunately, I didn't get drafted. But the USFL, the United States Football League, came out the same year that I was drafted in '84, and they drafted 2 inside linebackers, and I was one of them. And unfortunately, U.S. San Antonio never called me for 2 weeks after I was drafted. They're supposed to call you like right
Nice,
then.
a little welcome. Yeah.
Yeah, a little welcome. 2 weeks, and my agent finally gets the call, and the contract was okay. I mean, back then it was like I think
Unless you were
250,000.
Herschel Walker. Yeah.
Yeah, and my agent just said, "Nah, I don't think you should. I think you should wait." And for the NFL. And unfortunately, I didn't get drafted by the NFL. And Doug Graber, who placed me at linebacker, had left Montana State after 1 year and went to Kansas City. So he was in touch with my agent because they wanted to draft me. And unfortunately, they didn't in the late round. I would have been a late round draft pick anyhow. But yeah, the 3.5 games that I missed and us not doing well, it really hurt my chances. And and then I went on to the NFL and played a few games with the Chiefs, and then got hurt. Went back to Montana. I had 2 quarters left of school. I went back to Montana State, finished up 1 quarter, and then I signed with Toronto Argonauts up at the CFL, and I played up there for about 1.5 years. And then they silly rules up there. They can only have so many Americans on the team if they're injured, and they were shuffling people in and out. It wasn't my idea of playing professional football. So I went back to Montana, went back to MSU, and I had that last quarter left. I graduated, which I can't believe I did. I mean, none of my friends were there. I went by myself and lived in some basement. I don't even remember what happened, but I finished my degree. And that's when I got into bodybuilding, because football, just nobody would sign me. It was tough. Back then, you didn't have social media. It was all
Yeah.
about getting on a call and calling someone. And so then I got into bodybuilding and did the Mr. Montana and took a couple competitions here, and kind of got depressed with life about, because I still wanted to play football.
Yeah.
And the way I ended up to California from here was my granddad ran the recreation department in Los Angeles, and knew a gentleman by the name of Luke Dwellin, who ran the downtown athletic club. And I called him and told him I was looking for a job, and they flew me out, hired me, and I drove my little Mazda B2000 pickup truck from Great Falls, Montana to Pasadena. And I lived there for about 1 year. And then the Rams went through that strike season, and they called my agent, and I immediately signed. I quit my job and signed with them. And then the first game I got hurt, so it
On
didn't
a
matter.
kick return, right?
Oh, it was just, yeah, it was a hellacious hit. It was just yeah, the trainers, it was like an injury that you'd have in a car crash. It
Mm.
was just so devastating. It was just a perfect hit. It was, running down the kickoff, a guy just happened to blindside me, and everything just kind of smashed up this way, and I crushed my larynx, punctured a lung, fractured my scapula, broke my shoulder. And silly me, I played the whole game with all that stuff, and bleeding internally, and they rushed me to the hospital, and it took me 3 years to heal up from that injury, and that was the end of my career. Yeah.
How was it for you? Because I know you talk a lot about mental toughness. Talk about mental toughness. You've been striving for this dream to play professional football, and then boom, it was like from that, it was like kind of bouncing around. Where were you at that point after you were done with the Rams before Gladiators?
Yeah, not good. I'll be honest with you. It's
Mhm.
anytime you're a professional athlete and that dream's taken away, some dark times. Boy, you talk about some bad thoughts, suicidal thoughts,
Yeah.
depression. The good thing, I think, if I wouldn't have met Dan Clark, Nitro, he also played with the Rams. We became really good friends and roommates. I think if it wasn't for Dan, even though at the time I didn't know it,
Yeah.
we were young. I was injured, 3 years to heal up from that injury. But we were still working out. We were partying like rock stars and going out. And I think if I didn't have Dan in my life, things would have turned out differently, probably in a bad way. But I think just, growing up, having another roommate who worked out, like-minded type 2 individuals, and I just think it definitely helped to pull me out of those dark times. But it wasn't easy. But that mental toughness where you just keep forging ahead because that's all right? I mean,
Yeah.
as an athlete, I knew how to train, what to do every day, and that's taken away. It's like, what do I do now? I'm still going to the gym, but why am I doing 6 hours of extra cardio work and plyometrics and all this other stuff that's involved in being the best athlete you can? So yeah, it was pretty tough. It was a tough deal. Yeah.
How important, like you said, to have that friend right there that, does he even know that he pulled you out of that without even really trying, just by being there for you?
I don't think so. We've
Yeah.
never really talked about it. I talked about it on the documentary when they interviewed me, but they didn't air that part of it. But yeah, Dan and I still speak today. We're good friends. But yeah, I've never discussed that with him, and I don't think he knows. But that's a good point. I might have to share that one day with him. And yeah,
Yeah.
it was a pretty special time. Yeah.
How in the world did y'all get involved in American? Because you are on more episodes. Correct me if I'm wrong. Your longest running
Yeah.
gladiator, more episodes than any other, most injuries too.
Most injured.
Uh, but
Yeah.
yeah, you were kind of the poster boy for gladiators because I remember you on there was the Nintendo game, there was
Oh,
trading cards, there was, I
everything.
mean, action figures. So
Yeah.
how in the world did you get into American Gladiators?
So here's what happened is Dan Nitro, we both had the same commercial agent. We were both competing, going out on commercial auditions, and Dan got a call from our agent to go try out for this new show called American Gladiators. Well, for whatever reason, and my recollection of what happened is different than Dan's, but my recollection was the agent told Dan to tell me because we were both roommates and we had the same agent. Dan
Yeah.
never told me, but his recollection wasn't that at all. Anyhow, he goes and Dan tries out for the Gladiators and gets casted as Nitro. Well, I'm kind of upset thinking I played pro ball. I mean, we're roommates. How come I didn't do this audition? But so long story short, Dan gets casted. There's 26 shows in one season or one season. So after 13 episodes, obviously they had Malibu as one of the originals, and whether I don't know how Malibu what he says, but good athlete, but he wasn't just the most mentally tough. He couldn't take a lot of hits. I mean, there's some guys that just are
We played
not mentally.
racquetball.
Yeah, he's a racquetball player. I mean, he's
Yeah.
not a physical. I'm in your face tackling you guy.
Mhm.
And so they stopped production, and some other things happened, but they had another tryout, and I tried out. And at the time, I was trying to get into modeling. I was down to 205 pounds. I was on a
Wow.
ate about 1,000 calorie diet to lose all this muscle mass because I was already at 5 to 6% body fat at 230. So I was just losing muscle, and I was doing 4 hours of cardio a day to get down to about 205. And when I tried out for the Gladiators, I was 205 pounds going against guys that were 260, 280, and I was kicking their ass at
Mhm.
205. And tried out. I had a 3-day tryout, and they casted me as one of the Gladiators. And I came up with my own name, and that's how it started. And so I was one of the originals, considered one of the originals as part of season one, but the second half of season one, which is
Yeah.
the next 13 episodes. So that's how that worked. And I was on the show for the next 7 seasons. And did more shows than anybody, and had, like you said, I had more injuries than anyone as well. But that's part of being an athlete too. So
I always find it interesting with characters like, Laser and Nitro and Malibu is probably the most, he mentioned it. He was probably the most over the top with his character, but you see it a lot with like pro wrestlers where they have these, you're Jim Starr, but you're Laser.
yeah,
And, did you have a tough time differentiating between the two? Or I think you said it was what, season three, where you were allowed to kind of just be yourself.
yeah. That's true. In the beginning, like Malibu and all, they kind of gave them personas really ham it up in front of the camera. They
It's a
kind of get,
character.
yeah, like a character. Well,
Mm-hmm.
finally, when I got on, it was like, I'm not much of like a, I don't have a lot of charisma, I think, when it comes in front of a camera and trying to come up with stuff just
Cutting a
arbitrarily.
wrestling promo.
Yeah, like I just
Yeah.
want to kick your ass and move on. And
Yeah.
and the first year or two, they kind of was having us try to ham it up. And finally, season 3, I remember we were in the locker room. They said, for this season, just be who you are. Come across the camera when we interview you after an event or whatever. Just be you. Just say whatever's on your mind. And I got to tell you that was it was just a blessing because
Yeah.
that was right up my alley. Now I could just be who, instead of trying to be an actor, even though it was full go 110%. You saw what you saw. There was, it wasn't fake. It was real competition.
Yeah.
The interviews were kind of hamming up, but after season 3, what you saw is the real person behind that camera. So it was pretty cool.
Yeah. A couple of questions that, I've asked about the TV tapings and stuff, but how are you when you found out about like the royalties that kids were playing with the action figures and playing Nintendo games and you weren't getting much of any of that?
Yeah, I don't know. There's when you put your body and mind and soul on the line, you expect to get something in return, right? And I think
Yeah.
that's life, right? And that's your action figure. That's me on the American Gladiator vitamin line, on keychains and Halloween costumes and macaroni and cheese boxes, and you're not getting like even a cent from it. You kind of like, yeah, that's kind of cool, but yeah, whatever. Yeah, I
Yeah.
am thrilled that the action figures. I think they only made Zap, Gemini, Laser.
Nitro had one.
I think Nitro, maybe Ice,
Yep.
but those 4, and it's pretty cool because you can still find them on eBay and all that.
Hmm.
I think it's cool, but it sure would have been a lot differently if we would have had some merchandising rights against all that, all the different pieces within the merchandise itself.
It's crazy to me because I mean, if you look at a model like WWE where they own the rights to like The Rock, but
Yeah.
Dwayne Johnson still gets cuts from T-shirt sales and action figure
Yes.
sales and video games. So it's just that I thought with all the documentaries, I was like, wow, that's the craziest part to me was that the royalty piece and
Yeah.
like someone like Nitro who is just out there. I mean, I'm sure there was magazine covers and all this other stuff, and
For sure. Yeah.
yeah,
You know, but I don't know. It's one of those things where, again, I always say it is what it is, and there's not much you can do to
yeah,
change it, right? And you learn a valuable lesson because if the show would have happened today and came around today, it would be a different situation
a
for
lot different.
those gladiators, different contracts, different merchandising rights, and everybody wins. It's a win-win for everybody.
100%. Yeah. And what about steroid use? I've always been
Yeah,
real curious about steroid use. So, uh, several gladiators real open about the use of steroids.
yeah,
It's very interesting to listen to the documentary how kind of got around that at times.
yeah.
But I've been curious. I was talking to my wife about this topic. Did you see any like side effects like later in life?
Me, no. Personally, no. Was steroids prevalent? Absolutely. I think we as a society and people that are even watching your podcast, you know, this was the 80s and 90s where they were rampant. I mean, it
Stallone?
wasn't like there was a conglomerate of how could I say this? You know, when you were an athlete and if you knew of steroids, you probably were doing them, right? I
Yeah.
mean, it wasn't. I remember in college. I mean, I started about my junior year in college, just one cycle. I mean, my gosh, incredible. And I never abused it, but almost everyone was using it. It wasn't an omen. It wasn't like, oh gosh, you're doing it. It was
Yeah.
like, oh, what are you doing? Like, you know, there's one thing that I do want to reclaim that the gentleman that, and I think it's Aton Keller, that said he walked into the Gladiator locker room and there was syringes everywhere.
All
I'm
over
gonna
the
tell you, that
floor.
is, I sent him a LinkedIn message. I am so upset with that gentleman because that never occurred. Nobody sits around and it's not like someone's in a bathroom doing cocaine and everyone's doing
Yeah.
a line. I mean, that was as far-fetched a lie. And why, at his caliber of a professional, why he would lie about something like that was so adamantly untrue. It upsets me beyond. I mean, I'm so upset with that guy for lying about that. That's not that never happened. There was nobody was shooting up steroids in any one locker room. If you did it, you're doing it in your own privacy. Maybe your buddy who's giving you an injection in your buttocks, maybe, but you don't talk about it outside of your close knit circle of friends. So yeah, I mean, it was prevalent. Did I do it? Yeah. The one thing I can say that, and I don't know if the word is proud, but I was happy with the way I went about it because I never abused
Mm,
anabolic steroids like some of my buddies did. I mean, they went down some bad paths. I mean,
yeah.
they couldn't get off. It really messed with them psychologically. I did 2 cycles a year, and that was it. And they were 6 week cycles. That was it. 6 weeks, take 5 months off, do another cycle, and I did that for quite a few years. Um, and that was it. The one thing that most people don't realize, you don't take an anabolic steroid and all of a sudden now you're ripped and massive and you put on 20 pounds of muscle.
Yeah.
You have to train your ass off. You got to have good genetics. You better know your nutrition inside and out. That's 80% of the game. You
Mm,
better take care of yourself on the sleeping side of it, on getting enough rest, dietary supplements. It's not a magic pill or an injectable where you now take an anabolic steroid and hypertrophy and fat loss is imminent, and it doesn't happen that way. And that's the misnomer that many people think, because you're on steroids now you're a better athlete. You're already the athlete. You may be stronger, you may be able to train longer and recover quicker, but it doesn't make you a better athlete, and it
right.
doesn't make you gain 20 pounds of lean muscle tissue overnight. You better train your fanny off and better know what you're doing. So, that's important for the audience to know, is it's not a magic pill, that's for sure.
Yeah. That's good to know. I appreciate you opening up about that. A couple of last questions here about the Gladiators. When was your time where you were like, you know what, with these injuries mounting up, this is the one injury I think that it's probably time to hang up the boots.
Yeah, and that's exactly what happens, Rep. Is we were doing the dinner theater show in Kissimmee, Florida, kind of
Yeah.
goofy. People are eating pork chops.
The
We're going up
alien dinner.
just goofy
Yeah.
stuff. I mean, they had the same contenders, same gladiators. I was like, really? I mean, I got to go up against the same guy. I get to know you. You think I'm really going to 110% try to take your head off? No. So I'll tell you. So I was with the show for 2 months. We all of us guys were living in an apartment, and I went out with Reggie Bigler, who became Tank on the live tour show. Great guy, great athlete, one of my best friends today. And we went out partying one night, and so he gets to the place where we're going to be, and he's in the parking lot, and it's 2 stories. And he gets there earlier, and I park on the second story of this parking structure, and I hear him yelling my name, and he's down on the first story, on the first level, and I'm on the second level, and there's just a little opening, and he goes, "Get your ass down here." So I jumped, and I had cowboy boots on, and I jumped from the second story to the first story, so I didn't have to walk all the way around, and I caught the edge of my boot on the parking, those concrete pillar
Yep. Yep.
parking structure, and it caught my boot, and I blew my ankle out. I'm telling you, so bad. That was it. I
And you got a
I
boot on.
and I had a cowboy boot on, and I'm telling you, that ankle, every ligament, tendon, I went back
Oh,
to California, and I did trip that way. I finally said to myself, that was it. I was so done getting injured and recovery and surgeries, and I finally just had enough, and that was
yeah.
it. And I never returned. I sad about it, but boy, I couldn't do it any longer. I was done being hurt.
Your body was telling you we're done at this point.
I done, yeah, my body's done. I was done, and mentally I was
Yeah.
done. I could tell then. When athletes finally retire, and you're like, how you're at the height of your career? Well, you just know, and I knew. I mean, the injury and mentally, my mind was finally there where I was done,
Yeah,
just
it's
done.
it's it's better than when they're trying to hang on though, and it's like
Yeah,
you're screaming at them to
right.
quit.
Yeah,
You're like, come on, you can't even.
right.
Yeah. Well, for our listeners out there, tell them how cool it was to do the Netflix documentary, and then tell them if they haven't heard about it, why they should go check that out.
Yeah, for sure. I had a blast doing it. They rented an old abandoned warehouse in downtown LA. We had different shoot dates, all of the gladiators that came in. The production team, Tony, the director, is awesome. Just we had an after party. I mean, it was just a Netflix did it right.
Hmm.
And people that haven't seen the five episode series called Muscles and Mayhem, the undocumented American Gladiators story, it it really gives the audience how the show started, where it came from, the games, how dangerous it was, off-scene camera shots. A lot of those things I've never seen before until I saw the documentary myself. It gives the audience who either watch the show or the new generation that's never seen the show, but their mothers and fathers did, or aunts or uncles, and they're turning them on to it. When you watch the show, it gives the audience how we weren't well taken care of financially. Talks about the injuries. Talks about our personal stories, our life. With Dan Clark, Nitro, and his dad and mom, and his losing his brother at a
That
young
was
age,
sad.
and
Yeah.
yeah, very sad. And then Debbie Clark, who's Storm, who became homeless. My wife and
Hmm.
I helped her out, got her off the streets.
Oh, wow.
It really goes into some heartfelt stories about our times on the Gladiators, and it's still ranked in the top 10. We were number one rated Netflix show for over 2 weeks, and that's worldwide. So that says a lot. That says a lot, and we're really proud of it. And I think Netflix and Tony, the director, did phenomenal, phenomenal. There probably could have been a couple more episodes they could have added, but they felt like five was the perfect number, and I think they did it right.
Yeah, it's very well put together. I definitely, me as a fan, I love seeing it as one of, in my opinion, the first reality series that
For
was out
sure.
there before Survivor or Amazing Race or any of these other
Yep.
ones. It was very good job. Definitely take some time. We binge watched it, and so I like the 30 for 30 and I like the Netflix. I like both of them just because they were gladiator stories, but I did like how Netflix, I felt like, didn't just focus on the story of the
No,
creators and it was the actual gladiators were more of the focus. And
for sure.
that's what I really liked about the Netflix piece. And last thing here before we wrap this episode,
Yeah.
tell our listeners about all the current stuff that you're doing now.
Yeah, for sure. Well, for the last 26 years, I was in product development for nutritional products, dietary supplements for the health club market only. I was I was the VP of product development for 24-hour fitness for almost 11 years. And I went to Lifetime
Really?
uh, Fitness with that big health club for 5 years. Started my own company called Sports Nutrition Consulting Group as a consultant for dietary supplements. I can put a product together. I know the CFR rules, the FDA. I got formulators that will help me. Dr. Tim Ziegenfuss, a big, nice, good friend of mine who's nationally recognized as one of the best formulators when it comes to nutritional products. And then I was with a couple other larger companies, and then just recently, just kind of trying to find my way, trying to find the next opportunity. I was with a startup company out of Golden, Colorado, and they just couldn't raise Series A funding, so they had to realign their company. And unfortunately, I was one of the realignments that got booted. That was this year, and that's kind of tough because my wife and I moved to Denver for that job. So I'm looking for my next opportunity. But I recently, kind of the last couple of years, it's called Laser in the House, where I come to your home. I actually did this with a buddy of mine in Montana. I lived with him for 2.5 months, taught him how to eat, showed him how to
Wow.
cook food, showed him the lifestyle, how to lose weight. His cholesterol was 270. He was in poor shape. I got him down to about 205. And so it's called Laser in the House. And what people do, I either come live with you full time, or I go into your guest house, or someone that has an Airbnb and they put me
Yeah.
up, and I'm at their beck and call 24/7. I teach them the lifestyle of how to eat, how to
Wow.
live an optimal life, health, lifespan and health span. And I did that for a couple of years, and I'm kind of getting back into that. So yeah, if anyone's interested, and it's not cheap, but I'm there 24/7 for you. And if anyone's interested, they can always reach out to me. You can find me on social media. So pretty cool.
How cool is that? As opposed to
Yeah,
getting down at Planet Fitness to
yeah,
show you some stuff. That's
yeah.
super cool concept.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Well, a lot of people think it happens in the gym, right? Oh, I'm going to go train at the gym.
yeah,
Nothing happens in the gym. You don't
and
grow
then
in
they're
the gym.
mad. They're not losing weight.
You don't lose fat in the gym. It's the other 23 hours outside the gym that, if you don't know what you're doing those 23 hours, and it doesn't take a lot
Yeah.
of work, it just takes someone to guide you in the right
Discipline.
direction. And that's it. And so those 23 hours is where I hone in on the client, and I change their lifestyle, and reverse mitigate, and actually sustained a lot of their chronic illnesses. And it's pretty cool because my background's in nutrition, and I was a personal trainer there for many years, and
Yeah.
I think I know what I'm talking about. And yeah, so anyone interested, they can definitely reach out to me.
Yeah. Have you thought about doing like an app, like being able to have people sign up virtually and you do
Yeah,
check-ins with them?
I haven't thought of that, but that's a great idea. I'll have to think about that. Yeah.
Yeah, check in every couple hours and
Right.
meal
Yeah,
times and stuff. That's wow,
sure.
that's a good idea.
Yeah.
I like Laser in the House. So just
Laser in the
contact you.
house, literally.
Last question for you.
Yeah.
When all is said and done, 50 years from now, grandchildren's grandchildren, all of them are talking about you. Your name's definitely out there with the documentary and everything. What do you want people to say about you?
I just want people to say I was a good guy.
Yeah,
Yeah, just a good guy. That at the end of the day, I gave it my all. I was just a good guy, because that's important to me. Is with work, colleagues, my friends. You just want to be a good person. Put a smile on your face. Don't be a jerk. Yeah, I just want to be known as, when they think about me, I was just a good guy, and hopefully a good provider for my family. Yeah, don't make me cry,
definitely.
Trip.
Well, I look, I can't thank you enough for being on here and connecting with me and being able to share your story with our audience. I mean, like I told you, the kid in me grew up loving the Gladiators, but as I told some of the other ones,
Yeah,
the man in me has grown up to really appreciate the people
thank
behind
you.
those personas and everything y'all have been willing to share with audiences out there because you never know, like you said, just you telling your story about your father, how much that distributes out and impacts stories you'll never hear about. There are
Yeah,
fathers and sons who've restored a relationship because of something you shared either on a podcast or a documentary, and they're never going to know. But it's incredible to think the impact that y'all are having out there by sharing
appreciate it.
these. And I can't thank you enough,
I
folks.
can't. Yeah, and I can't thank you enough, Trip. I really appreciate it. You're awesome, and thank you for serving our country, and uh, deeply appreciate that. Definitely. So I want to say thank you for reaching out. I really enjoyed a lot of the questions. The questions were unique in and of itself. A lot of those questions no one's ever asked me. So thank you. I
I'll take
appreciate
that
it.
as a win. I'll take
Yeah,
that as a
that's a
win.
win, boy. Yeah, thank you. I appreciate it.
Appreciate you. Folks, if you like what we're doing, head over to theshadowspodcast.com, Spotify, Apple. Please leave us a review. Let us know what you think. And until next week, we'll see you with another episode of the Shadows Podcast.
Thanks, Trip.